forget, a couple years ago, I heard him in Colorado. Time is undefeated. Like every time you say you're going to do something or you'll get to it later, time is still moving. And every person that we watched when we were a kid on television and all the idols that we looked up to, they're all getting older now, And if you ask them now, like what they would have done differently, usually it's a lot. I would have started sooner. I would have valued things differently. Time does not stop moving. So let's take advantage of it. We can't change what happened yesterday.
All right. So welcome to another episode of the Fully Funded podcast. We have a very special guest here, Mr. Daniel Ray. That's weird to say, by the way. It'll never get old. We'll get into that later. So just wanted to learn a little bit about yourself. You are not a financial advisor, or you are a financial advisor? I always get confused because I always find that most financial advisors are just a fluffy term, not necessarily, like basically glorified insurance salesman. Is that good or bad to say?
Yeah, in our industry, it's like there's so many facets of finances and things that pertain to it. So financial advisors, they help out with things like investments and securities and things of that nature. And then you have the insurance world that you can use insurance products or solutions to help with financial goals. But if you're licensed to sell that, like insurance products, you're not necessarily a financial advisor. So, I'm a financial advisor with, I think I have to say this for compliance purposes, but with GWN Securities. There's been a lot of changes here. I know, right? I'm like looking over my shoulder.
Zach literally told you in the beginning of this is not but you have to.
They're always listening. Yeah.
We want to know who Danny is. Not the financial.
Let's pause the financial thing, right?
Yeah,
and I always say that as a joke because like I see a lot of them and they call and they're like, "Hey, I want to sell you life insurance, or I want to sell you something you don't need," because there's a difference between having a financial advisor that's really wealth management, right, versus like what you do. But like, let's talk about you. How did you even get into that field?
So coming up in New York and my mother working in Manhattan, being a kid, being around all of that, I knew one day I either wanted to be an architect or I wanted to be a financial advisor. And, in thinking it was in middle school, they had us, stock picking at that time, picking stocks and looking at it every week to see how well they were performing. And it was just something I really enjoyed. But deciding to figuring out what I wanted to do with my career path. I had some friends, some people who I knew that were doing this before I was. And what was cool about them is, they started off, when they started, things were really rough, I remember one time I had a buddy who, I'd always crash at his house. I'd crash at his house, watch his TV, eat his food. And I remember him getting into this line of work. And in our world, as a wealth manager, you can work with we call like wirehouses, big companies like some of the Fortune companies that you may know. And then you have the independent side, where you're building up your own clientele. You're going out there and you're building the business from scratch. And it's really rewarding, but it can be tough at first. So he was doing that. And I remember him telling me, like, hey, man, you really need to get into this. I've always spoken about it. You have a knack for it. And I'd see him baking cookies at like midnight to take to his clients and people he was marketing to.
I was wondering what kind of cookies you were talking about for a second.
Baking cookies
at midnight.
Whatever makes the sale.
They signed. I know that. They signed up with him. But I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, hey, man, I'm doing well where I'm at right now. I work for a Fortune 500 company. I wasn't in the financial business yet. And, you watch this guy working real hard, waking up real early to go to work, coming back real late. But what's really neat is every year you'd see him and a few other people doing it, and their lives just continued to get better and better. So now I work at a Fortune 500 company. I worked with AT&T. So they taught me a lot, how to sell, and they taught me a lot about, how that company thinks. And, I ended up being one of the top sales reps in the Southeast for what I did. And no matter what I did with that company, I was just a number, if things got hard for the company, they wouldn't think twice about letting me go, right? So I remember asking for time off for my wedding, and the manager at the time told me, hey, listen, my hands are tied. Somebody else requested time before you did. I can let you take a 1-hour lunch break to go to your wedding, but you have to come back, and if you don't come back, I'll have to write you up. So at the time, I was already studying. I went back to my computer. I typed up my 2-week notice. I brought it back, and I don't think he was expecting that. I think he was expecting me to move the wedding date, and that was it. You know, it's funny. It's like,
Wait,
again,
this is your wedding?
it is my wedding. Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Wait, somebody said that to you?
So they said it to me. The manager, the acting manager at the time, said, "Hey, listen, you could take a 1-hour lunch break, go to your wedding, but you have to come back. I'm sorry, my hands are tied." And I'm like, "Listen, I do everything for you guys. You know, I'm top on the list. You know, I work real hard. I'm there, but it didn't matter. I was just a number." So yeah, I knew I was gonna segue into this line of work anyway, but it was just it was something that it got me going quicker than I probably would have done otherwise, and it was the best thing I ever did. But at the same time, you know, for the first few years, it was terrifying. But you know, what's interesting about that is when I gave them my notice, and you know, they were trying to convince me to stay, right? They had the regional managers flying out to meet with me to convince me to stay, and you know, no matter what happened, no matter what case I made, they were like, "Hey, listen, again, sorry, based on our rules, our hands are tied. Someone else requested the time off," and it didn't matter how much I did for them. So what's really interesting is the reason why I chose to go the independent route as opposed to working with a big box firm is also because of my experience there.
It's funny. I don't know why it wasn't until this moment that I realized that both of you had the same start, except yours was Verizon, right? Or
Yeah.
T-Mobile, Verizon,
Well,
and yours was AT&T, right? That was really like a lot of your stories come from your experiences working in selling cell phones.
And now I can't figure out how to work a cell phone now.
Well, that's 'cause you're old.
My 6-year-old knows how to utilize or work with our phones more than I do at this point.
That's because you're old.
Yeah,
You're
well,
the
I
older
know.
brother too, so you just want to make sure that's very clear. You're older.
There's some sort of prejudice happening right now.
Well, it's
I
only
don't
because your
appreciate
daughter
it.
asked me one time. She's like, "Who's older, you or Daddy?" I was like, "Your dad's definitely older."
Yeah, but
But
I
it was
younger.
offended. Was that?
I'm sorry.
Your gray hair
No,
does
they're
not
not picking
dictate that.
I don't think it's picking up the sound. Sorry.
No, but I think a lot of people, no one just like wakes up in the morning and says, "I'm going to have a successful business." There's a catalyst for everybody's journey and how they get there. And like a lot of what we talk about here with our podcast is how do you achieve things in your life and leverage, you know, the financial industry around you to be able to do that. And so for some people, it's just their main job. You know, we talked about mortgages. We've talked about, you know, real estate, you know, things like Turo, right? And so you've been able to accomplish a lot in your life by just elevating yourself from selling cell phones to realizing I have a purpose in life and then being able to fulfill that purpose. But for you, it seems like a lot of it came from a desire to be happy with yourself versus the paycheck that came to follow.
Yeah, I always I refer to it to the superhero complex. You know, like I've always, I mean, you've known, like I always thought I would be
Yeah,
I'd be
Mr.
Superman
Clark.
at some point, be as close.
I mean, look, he's Clark Kent. All he needs is the little curl on his forehead, right?
You know, I get that a lot. I always get the dorky alter ego. I never get Superman. You know, they always say you look like Clark Kent, but I never get Superman. By the way, you know, I always had that superhero complex. Like I wanted to save people. You know, and but you know, as a kid, I never wanted to be a firefighter or a police officer. You know, like this is the stuff I wanted to do, and you know, it's like we're all put in a position to make a difference. You know, regardless of what we're doing or where we're at. You know, I think we all have a responsibility to put our best foot forward. And if you leave a place, hopefully you left it better than what you did than when you came.
So most people think that when you see a podcast and we talk about everything, right? Like it's about getting rich. That's what most people probably get on and see some of the things that we talk about. It's like, how do I get rich? But it's not always about that because you don't deal with, I mean, I'm sure you deal with some wealthy clients, but not a lot of them are wealthy. So tell us a little bit about the clientele you deal with and how they're able to sustain themselves beyond their job into retirement. Like, what does wealth management actually mean?
And well, geez, these days, I mean, you know, like finance or wealth management, wealth and finances consist of a lot of things now. Now, it's not just your money. It's not just your bank account. Like, it's the things that you value. Recently, I think perspective is really important. A lot of us have had perspective over the last couple of years. But, you know, our dad recently has gone through a lot of health issues, particularly with his heart. And it called to mind when he went through this, that saying that, a healthy man has 100 dreams or 100 goals, but a sick man only has one. So now if you're a sick man and you may not have that much time ahead of you, what's wealth at that point? Is it your bank account? Possibly, but it could be other things as well. So figuring out, what are the valuable things in life? What are the things that you want to attain? And what are your actions? Like, what are the goals that you have to get you to those things? So when you think about the people and where they fall when it comes to retirement planning, wealth management, I believe that your financial goal should be, how do you get to a point where you never have to trade in your time for a paycheck, right? So we all, I've said this 1,000 times by now, but from the day we get our very first job, right, or going for our very first interview, we make an agreement, right? Listen, I'm going to give you the most valuable thing that I have, and in return, you're going to give me a check, right? I need money to live. And at first, it's a good deal, right? Like, you have a lot of time ahead of you, and you don't have that much money. But as the years go on, we have less and less times ahead of us. And hopefully the pay keeps up. And we know with a lot of industries it doesn't. But hopefully the pay keeps up. But there is a point where you don't only have so much time left. And it doesn't matter how much they're willing to offer you. You should get to a point where you don't have to do it anymore. Now, if you do want to do it, that's up to you. So I have a lot of clients that are independently wealthy that they finished their first career, now they're on to the next, but they're doing things because they want to do it. That's like those undercover millionaires working at Publix, putting your groceries in a bag. A lot of them have a smile on their face, and it's because they feel like they're doing something, like they have that connection with the community, with society, and they're just doing things on their terms. They don't need the money necessarily. So, I think whatever we do, you got to start with the end in mind. Like, if you think about everything that we do now, what we're doing today, how does that line up with the goals that you have? So if you want to have a productive relationship, a great relationship with your family, what are your decisions? What decisions are you making to make that happen, to make it a reality? And what I find is when it comes to things like finances, that finances is such an interesting topic because people will talk about things like their personal relationship more than they'll talk about their finances. Like, there's podcasts out there, and they talk about their relationships, things that they've done, the escapades, things that normally you would think, oh, I'll keep those things private. But when it comes to hey, let's talk about my bank account or my financial wealth or my relationship with money, people they struggle with that. So understanding what your goals are and then understanding what decisions you have to make to get you there. A lot of people are looking for that turnkey solution, that winning investment opportunity. And what I find is, this is, being successful financially has more to do with your habits. It has to do with having a solid foundation than it does with hitting home runs. It's like, I prefer to always get on base, like singles, doubles, potentially triples, right? But just never strike out or avoid striking out, as opposed to hitting the occasional home run, but never getting on base otherwise. I think that's more of a winning recipe. So I think your habits, your routines, like the foundations that you set in place, all those things are conducive to you having some level of success down the road. But again, it all starts with the goal. Figure out what it is that you want to accomplish. Figure out what you have and what you can do to get you there. And to me, it seems so simple. I'm making it sound simplistic because I've seen it a lot. I've seen people come to me after, whether they inherit a lot of money, they sell a business and get some substantial assets to work with. But I also meet a lot of people who they come to me with their heads down, like, hey, listen, I should be a lot farther along than I am, but I don't know if I'm going to be able to do it.
I have a question for you. So
give it a shot.
You said something in there that I liked about we don't have enough conversations around financial stuff, right? We're always talking about relationships and everything. So, as somebody who advises people, I mean, outside of just conversations that we could have with our peers, how about specifically conversations that we should be having with our significant other? My parents, I'd probably say one of the largest attributes to them getting divorced was probably over money, right? And one of the things I made a decision why I worked so hard is because I wanted that to not, I didn't want that cycle to repeat in my relationship with my wife. So we actually don't have conversations about money, but I'm wondering, should we have conversations about money? And what types of conversations should you be having with your spouse surrounding money?
Yeah, the short answer to that is I believe yes. And that comes with a little bit of a caveat. If one person isn't really good with money, and if they know that money's there, they're going to spend it. That's you got to take that with a grain of salt. But again, I think in order to be in a successful relationship, you're acting as one. I have a lot of people that come to me and they're like, hey, we have different assets and different accounts. That's great. You can have your different accounts, but are we working towards the same goal? Because if we are, we need to make sure that the whole household portfolio is working together.
Yeah.
In order to make sure that we're working together, there has to be some level of communication.
So what do you think about separate bank accounts?
Ooh, separate bank account. I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing. There's times where separate bank accounts are, they make a lot of sense. Especially like if you had an inheritance or something, you're trying to keep money separate. But
I don't give my wife the password to our account.
Yeah, well,
Wow.
my wife,
Wow.
I see transfer alerts all day long here.
No, my relationship's different because she lets me handle everything.
So
So,
same thing.
she's a
Nadine just
signer
knows
on the
swipe
account,
swipe the card as long as there's money there. It should be
But it's
fine.
funny because when he started out, he signed me up for a life insurance plan, and then I got married, and she's just like, "Am I on it?" I'm like, "What does it matter?" She's like, "It matters to me." And it was funny, that was important in that moment, and now it's not important anymore. Probably because I have 4 other policies now, and she'll be fine.
You got four
you got
insurance
4
policies?
Well, I guess
Yeah,
you
she's
do.
got 3, and the company's got 1.
Oh, jeez.
He wrote all of them.
Yeah. So having it's good. Sometimes talking about it could be tough. You're having a tough conversation. But again, that's when I come into play. Or someone like me can come into place where we're more of a mediator. Sometimes it's easier hearing something from a third party than it is hearing from your spouse. I deal with boring people, financially, fiscally responsible people. But no, I've heard some crazy stories. I had a client who, I remember her, calling the office and making requests for large amounts of distributions. And I'm like, what is going on? She's asking for, large amounts of money, taxable, penalties, everything. And after about the 3rd or 4th large distribution she made, I'm like, okay, listen, we need to have a conversation. What's going on? She says, oh, well, I got a friend. I'm loaning money. I'm going to get a return. It's guaranteed, right? A couple months later, I get another I hear.
It was a Ponzi scheme?
Well, not quite. Well, it was something because she called the office and actually didn't want to speak with me. She's trying to get some information together, and I'm like, well, listen, my calendar just freed up. She's going to speak to me right now. Get her on the phone. Hey, what's going on? And she wouldn't tell me. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to say names, but this is a judgment-free zone. Tell me what's going on. Well, hey, Daniel, you know how you told me not to take out all that money and give it to somebody and not have a contract in place? And I said, yeah, I remember that. Well, she met a guy on ChristianMingle.com.
Did she get her money back?
Unfortunately, she didn't get her money back.
Okay, but it was the Christian Mingle guy from overseas.
She did. And she called the FBI. The FBI knew who this guy was, and
They couldn't do anything about it because the money was gone.
yeah. Recently, I got a call that I think they found the guy. He was arrested, but that money's gone. So yeah. It's funny. You can be. It's funny what another person, a relationship can do. So going back to your question, because I'm going to make sure we finish this. Something's got to come full circle here. Listen, if you're keeping things separate, you're keeping your finances separate going into marriage, yeah, have 2 separate accounts. Now, do I think you need to have a conversation about the credit score and what have you? That's a tough conversation to have. But think about what, the worst case scenario.
Till death do you part. So, credit
hold on,
scores.
That's not what that billboard said on the road.
I do agree that
$199 can.
I do agree that you should have a separate bank account for yourselves. Maybe a little money goes in there because who doesn't like a good surprise sometimes, right? And if everything is commingled together, how do you have that element of surprise later on into your marriage, right?
What do you mean?
What I mean is if we have everything is together and we see it's all full transparency, I could never buy my wife a gift. Because she's going to know exactly what I bought her, when I bought it for her.
I just
how
got
much
my
I
wife
spent
pregnant.
That's
for
what
it.
a credit card. That's what a credit card is for.
Listen, first of all, don't listen to any of their advice about having children because he went to 4, he went to 3.
That's what a credit card is for, by the way.
Even so, I'm just saying, I think it's okay to have something separate, but I think everything needs to be transparent, right? So, if you do have something separate and there's a reason for that, you guys should have that agreement in place between you and your spouse to know this is why it's separate. But if you're having separate because you don't trust them to control your money or have access to it, I think that from a marital perspective, you have deeper things you should probably look at.
Okay, let me ask you this, right?
But where this is not a marriage
Hold on.
podcast.
No, let me ask you this. If you get into business with someone, you get a partner in business, do you feel comfortable saying, hey, listen, why don't you have this account over here that I can't see? And I have this account over here. That
It's hard to say. It's hard to say because Zach does that. I control all the money. He doesn't see any of it. He just trusts me, so I appreciate you.
He trusts you. That's the first. That's the first mistake. No, but
you're talking about how to handle finances and bills. What I'm saying is, I think it's okay to have a separate account away from each other. If one person you're like, hey,
I'm gonna need access to all the accounts, by the way.
It's all his fault.
But yeah, so like transparency goes a long way. And if you're working on a team, we love team sports. Football, basketball, right? Like everyone has to know what role that they play. And maybe one person has a strength. Maybe their strength is being organized and paying the bills on time and what have you. Like so be it. But understanding what each role, like the role each person plays, I think is really important. And going into relationships with full transparency is extremely important. Because what will happen is you'll have your expectations, right? Each one will have their expectations that they didn't discuss or talk about with the other person. And usually when expectation and reality doesn't meet, then there's frustration. And that frustration leads to other future problems. So I think if you're being responsible about it, and you're being mature about it, yeah, you're going to be talking about some of those things that come into play. If you really care about the person that you're speaking, that you're getting into a relationship with, a business, a partnership, or what have you, yeah, I think that the conversation needs to be had. And
so some person handles it, but there's an underlining understanding about that he handles it all, and I have a trust. And
yeah, I mean, if you have a corporation, right, you might have the CEO, the CFO.
I still want Kayla to have some of her own funds because I like to be surprised sometimes. I've ruined my own surprise a few times by looking at the charges on the account. But like, what is this for? She's like,
see, I don't necessarily. I've never needed the surprise, so I don't really care about it. But again, that is, but that goes back to the goals and the actions. As long as your goals and your actions are in line with one another, you're in a good place. But
I just want a gift. That's all I'm asking for.
I'll give you a gift later.
Is that your love language? Wait, what?
I have something in my car. Jeez,
oh, okay.
It
was like, hello.
So speaking of which,
I have lots of questions.
He didn't like you. Well, okay, so first we have to answer the.
All right, let's do this, and then I got questions because this is the Fully Funded podcast. I want to hear some tips and tricks from a financial advisor.
I think that it's also important to know that
this is a podcast. I'm taking off my jacket.
Go for it. I also think it's important for people to hear it beyond just like. It's not like we hear wealth management. It's like, oh, you have to be wealthy to manage your wealth. It's like, well, no, that's not the case. Well, wealth management, like people have an understanding.
Got to be wealthy to manage your wealth.
Right, but you. Don't,
I get it. Yeah.
But people misconstrue that conversation because a lot of what you deal with is firefighters and police officers who need wealth management to govern the rest of their life. So it's not about like, oh, you got to be rich to have these conversations. The average person needs to have these kind of conversations.
You just mentioned, hey, you work with firefighters, you work with law enforcement and education. Yeah, it's a big part of what we do. It's like a niche market. We got into that from the very beginning. And what we found is that leads to the wealth management usually, whether it's their spouse and other business that they have and the connections.
Who's the best person to help? Is it the person who...
The best person to help is the person who's wanting it and willing to act on it.
Okay, so I appreciate that answer. What I guess I'm trying to say is like, how does somebody in your position decipher between the person who's just starting off versus the person that comes to you and says, "Hey, Danny, I got $1 million. Can you help me invest in it?" Like, how do you see that long term? Will you take on anybody, and how much money do you need to get started and manage? Having a financial advisor?
Yeah, that's a great question, man. So time, we all know this is a finite resource, right? So at first, when you have a lot of it, I was willing to help anybody and everybody, and then I had this epiphany, several years ago. We really can't, and nor do we want to be all things to all people. We want to be all things to some people. And that's what we chose to do, solve the bigger problems. And those bigger problems, it tends to be in line with those who are in that red zone of retirement, right? The last couple of years are those who have a significant amount of wealth that if they make a wrong turn, they could have a significant impact. But that doesn't mean we want to alienate everybody else. So for us, one of the things that we've done is we've like in my company, my firm, we've created these educational programs and, whether it be recordings and online training platforms for people to listen in and watch it so they can get some of those tips and best practices to make smart decisions when it comes to helping them reach their goals. But again, when you think about what it is that we all do with our time, that's really important. Our successes, our end result has a lot to do with the choices that we've made. And for us, the choice that I've made, with respect to leading my firm, is to make sure that we're solving the right problems. And that doesn't mean that we don't help those people. It just means that we all have a role that we play. It's like Tom Brady. Sorry, I know that we're not the biggest Tom Brady fans over here. Actually, you know what? It's more so the Boston fans. We're not a Boston fan. We're not Patriots. But Tom Brady, I mean, listen, he's the GOAT or a GOAT, right? With respects to the NFL. As great of a quarterback as he was, imagine having a bunch of Tom Bradys on the field. Like, that team isn't winning anything. Maybe the worst team of the year. So each department that we have serves a purpose. So, for example, we might have a department that focuses, like I spearhead this, private wealth management. Then you have retirement planning. So private wealth management would be for those who have a significant amount of wealth. Then you have retirement planning, those who are looking to build a retirement plan to get them to the point where they can, stop working after 30 years and live the life they've always wanted. Down to insurance management and things of that nature. How do I hedge against different risks that we have? So in our firm, each person, each professional there serves a purpose, right? And they solve a very specific problem. So if someone comes to me and says, "Hey, Daniel, I've heard you before. I've watched your videos. I've attended your classes, and I really like your help." But they're in that early stage of their career. As much as I'd love to help them, and maybe I can give them some advice, the best thing I can do for them is to point them in the direction where someone who focuses on that problem. They're going to be way better at solving that problem than I ever will be. But you can do all of this stuff, you can provide all this information, but if someone's not willing to take that information and do something with it, you're wasting your time. And most of us here, I think we get paid on like two things. It's like our opinion and our advice, So if you're giving your opinions, your thoughts, and your advice to people who will not take that and run with it and make something happen, you've wasted it. And if you look at your skills and you look at your time as an investment in a finite resource, how would you invest that within a portfolio, right? Mm-hmm. Well, I'm not going to invest it in those areas. People, we call them gonna doers. Yeah, I'm going to do this, but they never do. You can't help everyone. So for me, again, we choose to be all things to some people, not all things to all people. So
what are you doing right now for people? Your average American, right, is just struggling right now. Things are expensive, rent's at an all-time high, interest rates are as high as they've been in 10 plus years. The cost of living is very expensive. How are people even able to invest in their retirement right now? How do they even have any extra money to do that? What is your advice? What are some hacks to actually start now if you feel like you're living paycheck to paycheck?
Well, man, it's when I look at like our firm, when I look at Voyage Retirement Solutions and what we do, one thing that we pride ourselves on is the planning, building out comprehensive written plans, and we don't pride ourselves on picking the equities, the investments, and things of that nature. We know we do really well at the plan and the facilitating that plan with the client, which means that a lot of times we'll bring in the specialist, right? Portfolio managers to manage parts of their portfolio, and we manage those managers. They do great or do well, we keep them. If not, fire them and get someone else new, right? But in order to even get to that point and to do it responsibly, you have to have a plan in place. So I think I believe that's the very first step that any person should make. Start with a plan, right? These arbitrary numbers that people use, I think, is a joke. Hey, what percentage of my paycheck should I put towards my retirement or my investments? Well, I can give you a percentage, but if you don't have that in your free cash flow, if you don't have that, like, what good does that percentage do for you? So if you can look at your liabilities, your expenses, and then look at what you make above that, put away what you can afford to put away, right?
Is your industry growing because people are taking the stance of wanting to create more financial literacy for themselves, or is a lot of your business where a lot of that responsibility is on your team to go out and educate people and bring people in and get them interested about financial literacy?
Well, we don't really have people knocking on our door saying, "Hey, can you help us?" Right? Again, we're not that big box firm.
Yeah.
We're the ones going out and doing the education. Our business model is very simple. We don't have the billboards or the commercials. We just provide as much value as we possibly can up front. And in the past, it was so taboo, right? Talking about finances and, if you have trade secrets, you don't want to tell anyone. And now you have these YouTubers out there that are killing it because they put out all this information, they give information, and eventually, you realize, well, they're telling me how to do everything, but I don't want to do it. So, let me just call them and have them help me out here. We realize that's a great business model for us. So we give a lot of value, a lot of information, and then from there, people come to us and then say, hey, listen, we see you as the someone who's very knowledgeable in this arena. Can you help us out with it? Now, going back to what we're hearing from everyone, we are coming back from coming out of one of the best economies we've ever had. The last 12 years was incredible as far as growth was concerned. Now there's certain realizations that people are having, and I don't. Yeah, it's things are about to. I think could potentially get more rocky for a lot of people in the relatively near future. So, with this whole concept, this whole notion of I can't lower my expenses or I can't adjust my income, something has got to give. If you're saying, hey, listen, I cannot lower my expenses one bit, but I also cannot generate more income, you're in a really tough position. Mm-hmm. And if you're not finding that, solving that problem on your own, you absolutely need someone else. At the very least, a second opinion, someone who's not as emotional, because when you're emotional about money, you tend to make really bad decisions.
So basically what you're saying is if you can't do either one, you need to get help. But the answer is not just well, my job's not giving me a raise and my rank won't go down, so this is who I am. You're saying no. There's a plan. There's option C, which is just get some help. And is that where people like you come in?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, who you go to that might be a tougher question to answer, but the reality is not all financial professionals are created the same or created equal. You started off the podcast asking about, what's the differences out there. And I think you need to understand what problems those people are really, or what they're good at solving. And I think one of the biggest struggles I have in our line of work is when you have folks who are not properly educated or not, they don't have the proper ability to provide unbiased advice or guidance. And again, it's like what you mentioned earlier, maybe even before the podcast started. Insurance agents, are they financial advisors? They're not. They're limited as to what they can do. And it's not that they're not valuable. I mean, they're extremely valuable. Shoot, I know a lot of people whose lives have changed for better or for worse because someone either did have proper insurance in place or they didn't. But is it the end all be all? Absolutely not. Right? So if you cannot give advice on all fronts or provide guidance on all fronts, then you might solve one problem really well, but you're leaving the rest of your wealth or your financial picture up to question or up to, a chance. And I don't think I don't believe that's a responsible thing to do for you or your loved ones.
Yeah. So it's okay to ask for help. And I always remember one thing you said years and years ago. You said the first step that anybody in their late teens, early 20s can do to prepare for retirement is just not have debt, right? And so a lot of times I think that it's just the simple things, right? Keep your debt low, seek advice. You can find ways to propel yourself. But if you don't do those two things, you're probably going to find yourself in a bad position.
It's funny. It's there's the secret is that there is no secret. It's there, So again, I'll circle back around to the habits and the routines and also your relationship with money. Money was such a taboo topic when we were growing up, something we didn't talk about that much. And unfortunately, I've had experiences, and I'll save those stories for a different day, where because I chose not to talk about finances with a loved one, right, someone who could have benefited from my help, when things went wrong, so for example, a passing, a death, and when I looked at the financial picture afterwards, I realized what kind of value I can bring, and what I'm also not doing by not having those conversations. They need to be had. And sometimes you're having a conversation that's very uncomfortable, right? And that's what a lot of people are scared of. They're scared of what it looks like when they lift up the hood and look at the engine, their financial engine. So whatever you do, start now. The best time to start planning was yesterday. The second best time to start planning is today, right now. Start planning now. Whoever you are, whatever you're doing. And as far as who you work with, interview a few people. Do some research beforehand. Shoot, there's There's so much there's an abundance of resources out there. It's sometimes really good for us, but also can be really bad for us as well. But you got to start somewhere. If you don't have a plan in place, it's like those old sayings, right? If you don't have a plan, any road will get you there. Start with the plan in place. Start looking at putting your expenses, your liabilities versus your income in place. Think about your goals and come up with a plan. But mind you, when you make a plan, it's not set in stone. You can always change it. As your life changes, as your goals changes, it's a moving target, but if you have a plan in place, you can adjust it. If you don't, you're just guessing. And we're not in the business of guessing.
So what I want to do is a little fully funded segment before we end the show today. And fully funded has many meanings. One of the cores of the fully funded meaning, besides living fulfilled life and a lot of the other things that it represents for us, is kind of finding these hacks within money in terms of being able to enjoy and fund your life without it actually costing you a lot of money to do. And one of the things that comes to mind in the financial wealth category is utilizing insurance to leverage for retirement. So many people don't know, and I'd like you to expand on it. I invested in an insurance policy that actually not only does it protect me in the event of death, but it's actually going to pay me like a pension later on. So I'm getting kind of a 2-for-1 hacking the system where I'm investing in something that is going to actually pay me like a retirement account later on, but it's insurance and people don't think about that. So on this week's Fully Funded segment, you want to tell us a little bit about what that actually is?
Yeah, well, what it sounds like you have is something like a universal life policy or a whole life policy. I'd be fully funded, a couple of shots of tequila later, right? I'll be completely honest. I have a love-hate relationship with the insurance industry, and it's actually less the insurance industry, more the people who sell insurance. Because I will say this, and not that it doesn't work, but I've yet to meet someone who has come to me with an abundance of wealth that have done it with investing in an insurance policy. That doesn't mean that you can't do it. It just means that
I'm listening intently to this because you have 2 policies for me. I'm waiting to hear the end part
that
of
same
this.
policy?
Same type of policy. I got 2.
Interesting. And I have 1. So
So
I
let's
guess
hear
we're
it.
screwed.
I don't know. Apparently, from what
I guess
I'm
we're
hearing.
broke.
Did I mention I'm
check?
retiring after this segment? No. So
Did he sell it to you?
Yeah, 2.
All right, let's hear this, because
All right,
I got
go.
1 too. You didn't sell it to me, but that's fine.
So here's the reality: is those types of insurance policies were really abundant back in the day, and you had these notions that, hey, this can earn a lot of money for you. Didn't actually see it in practice. Didn't really see it happen. And there's multiple types of insurance policies like that, like whole life, universal life, fixed index universal life, a variable universal life. But the thing about that is that you have to really understand it and be committed with those types of insurance policies or those programs. And it can work. That the concept is there, right? And just to disclose as well, I have those types of insurance policies on myself as well. I have it more so as a hedging mechanism, though. See, that's what insurance was originally designed for. It's a hedge against risk. And when people start looking at it as an investment, it's like, well, okay, well, hold on. It can be, but really it's primarily a hedging mechanism. So, for example, if I die, my family gets a pretty significant amount of tax-free money, which is great because guess what? The income may drop for the family, possibly, right? Most people who are of retirement age, what most people don't realize is that when you're married, you file taxes jointly, right? It's a favorable tax bracket. But so you're married, you might have 2 sources of income, maybe 2 Social Security checks coming in. But one of you passes away, you lose one of those Social Security checks, and your taxes go up because a single tax filing is less favorable. So now, if you have an insurance policy coming into effect where it's tax-free, that can have a huge that can be a huge benefit for the surviving spouse. But kind of going back to what we're talking about here, I have that insurance policy on myself, right? I pass away, my family gets a tax-free benefit. But also, if I need it while I'm alive, right? There's something catastrophic happens, critical illness, I get injured, right? Alzheimer's, something along those lines, I can actually use some of those insurance benefits while I'm alive. That death benefit, if you will, I can accelerate a portion of it tax-free to cover some of those
costs. Can't you use it to buy a house?
Well, so you're thinking of 2 different components here. You have the insurance component, and then you have the cash value. So what you're referring to is insurance that you're overfunding. So you're, in essence, buying an insurance policy, and every year you're paying for the cost of that insurance. And typically, right, the cost of the insurance is increasing every single year. So initially, while you're putting more money into those accounts, now each, I got to say this in case compliance does listen, insurance policies, they're all created differently, and if you pick one, it has to be based on, your circumstances, your situation, but you got to read the fine print. So the cost of the insurance can continue to go up. And then the cash value, the portion that you're overfunding it with, can have its performance, right? It can experience growth based on the market performance, how it's invested. So if it's something that's a variable, right, you might see it go up or down. If it's something that's more on the fixed side, it'll just, either go up, it might stay flat, but it doesn't go down, at least due to market performance. But here's the problem. If you're in something that's variable, right, and it goes down, but the cost of insurance is going up, and you decide to take money out of it, how does that impact the insurance policy? Yeah. Can it blow up, so to speak, right? These are things that you need to know. What are the costs? Usually, the cost of those types of insurance policies are pretty expensive. And I'm very skeptical still, even though I have it, even though I utilize it for clients within their portfolio, it's not something I'm using with everyone. But there are some benefits that, in theory, if it pans out, right, not only can you generate income for yourself, if you properly structure it and you take it out correctly, you can do it tax-free. And it's, again, a great hedging mechanism. So we talk about what can it hedge against, what can it protect us against. It can protect against things like sudden death, illness, or potential rising tax bracket. And I'd imagine, you're making pretty good money down the road. And taxes, Uncle Sam is going to be your partner in just about most of what you do. But if you take it out correctly, it won't be a partner in at least that money.
So if you had to wrap up, just give us 3 things, right? We want to start preparing for our future retirement. I don't care what age I am. I'm 20, 40, 50. I just want to get started, all right? 3 things, quick, rapid fire.
Boom, boom, boom.
What should I be doing right now to get myself started?
If you ask me this tomorrow, I'll probably give you 3 other ones, but I'm going to give you these 3 right now. I would start with the goal. Figure out what that goal is. Have a conversation with, if it's just yourself, figure out what that is. If you're married or have a significant other, figure out what that goal is, and then establish a plan to get there. At least start writing those things out. The second thing is, putting value in the proper places. Remember, wealth isn't just necessarily the dollars that you have in your account. Kanye West said it best. Having money isn't everything, but not having it is. So yes, not having money is really important, but it's not everything. So focus on your faith, your health, your relationships. Those things are really important. You can't replace those things. And start now. Whatever it is that you're doing, start today. Stop saying I'm going to get to it tomorrow. Jesse Itzler, I believe he has a podcast. He has a couple of books that he's written. Awesome guy. He mentioned this, I forget, a couple of years ago. I heard him in Colorado. Time is undefeated. Every time you say you're going to do something or you'll get to it later, time is still moving. And every person that we watched when we were a kid on television and all the idols that we looked up to, they're all getting older now, And if you ask them now, what they would have done differently, usually it's a lot. I would have started sooner. I would have valued things differently. Time does not stop moving. So let's take advantage of it. We can't change what happened yesterday. I always say I want to write a book for, it's just a book of life experiences. I have those 3 kids I told you about, when they first start walking, right? Yeah, first start walking and running, they're like, "Hey, Daddy, look at me!" And they're running, but they're looking behind to make sure that I'm watching them. But inevitably, they trip over something, they run into something, and it's like you can only look in the rearview mirror for so long. You can only look at the past, and that's a very dangerous thing to do. It's important to learn from those lessons, but it's more important to focus on what's ahead of you. Start now, whatever you're doing, and if you don't know where to go, I think you probably know a person or 2 you can reach out to. If they want to reach out to us, you can go to askvoyage.com or voyageretirement.com. One of those 2 will get you there. And one of the things that we have in place is we build out comprehensive retirement plans for free. Granted, if you qualify, we'll have an initial conversation. The first conversation is a 15-minute get-to-know-you chat with one of our professionals to, at the very least, answer any questions that you have or figure out if there's an opportunity for us to help you. And whether or not you want our help. And then we take it from there. And if not us, you probably know someone. I find that referrals are a really big thing. You can ask someone that you really trust, who did you use, who helped you get there, but also do some fact checking, do some research.
Awesome.
Well, thank you very much. All right, guys. Well, that wraps up another episode of Fully Funded.
Did you want me to sit in synchronization with
Nah. Find us on all major platforms.
Fully Funded.
And
Is there a song here? Is there like a
we're going to get
jingle?
a song. Aaron, sing for us.
All right, guys. We're out. We'll see you next time.